G'day guys, I've just returned from the Australian ITC Championships where I took home Best in Faction for Chaos Space Marines. So what I wanted to do was release a 9-part series where I'm going to break down the list that I ran to this event to achieve these results with the new changes that are forced upon the Chaos Space Marine players by Arcs of Omen. I'm going to talk about what changes I made to the list to match this new season and how I went about it, what the list was designed to do, those sorts of things. Then I'm going to do a separate installment for each game that we played in this 8-round ITC major event. And basically I'm going to talk about the list that my opponent ran, the results that we got during the game, and the various strategies and situations that led to those results being achieved. So this will be similar to the Men's Masquerade series that I did after I won that GT, but much longer and hopefully much more interesting in a lot of detail. So with that being said, let's just jump straight into the video.
Welcome to the Black God.
Alrighty guys, in this first installment we're going to talk about the Chaos Space Marine list that I brought to Uprising for the Australian ITC Championships. We're going to talk about the changes that were made due to Arcs of Omen and the impacts that had on the meta, the predictions that I had, and how it all sort of panned out. But we're going to break down the details of the specific games in later installments in this series. So this one's just about my list and breaking down all of the strategies and the things that I designed the list to do. So with that being said, let's just jump straight into looking at the list. Alright, so it's an Arcs of Omen detachment, Chaos Space Marines, all of which were from the Black Legion. It had Abaddon the Despoiler with all 3 of his Warlord traits, Paragon of Hatred, Merciless Overseer, and Eternal Vendetta. We had a Sorcerer in Terminator armor, also known as Saucy. He was unmarked, he had a Force Sword, Combi Melter, Veilbreaker Plate, Diabolical Strength, Warp Time, and a Chaos Familiar. Next, we had a Master of Possessions, also known as Moppy. He had a Mark of Slaanesh, Liber Hereticus, Pact of Flesh, Mutated Invigoration, and Delightful Agonies. Then we had a Dark Apostle, also known as Dapo. He had Mark of Slaanesh, Cloak of Conquest, Illusory Supplication, and Blissful Devotion. Then we had 2 units of 10 cultists. There was a grenade launcher, a flamer, and a heavy stubber in each. Next, we had Chaos Terminators by 10, so 4 of which were equipped with Combi Melters, 2 of those were equipped with Chain Fists, and 2 with Power Fists. The unit had the Mark of Slaanesh and the Black Rune of Damnation. Then we had 3 Hellbrutes, also known as Heck Brutes. They were all unmarked with Multi-Melters, Heavy Flamers, and Hellbrute Fists. Then we had 2 Decimators, both equipped with double Soul Burner Petards, and we round the list out with 5 Chaos Raptors. Alrighty guys, there are a lot of synergistic elements to this list, so what we're going to do is we're going to break down the list's overall strategy, and then we're going to work out the different pockets within the list and how they interact with each other, and what combos are specifically used and are specifically powerful with this list. So, the general overarching strategy of the list was that the Terminators and the characters would create a castle, and then everything else, or as much of whatever else I had left, would start in strategic reserves. Now, thanks to Arcs of Omen allowing you to put things in strategic reserves for free, it didn't matter how many command points I had available because I was able to put all 3 Hellbrutes or Heckbrutes and the 2 Decimators all into strategic reserves. So this was a really, really powerful way of protecting those units and also ensuring that when those units do arrive on the tabletop, they're able to get the firing angles and the charges that they need in order to bring that damage to bear before your opponent has an opportunity to deal with them. This also served the purpose of making it so that the only eligible target my opponent had for most of the game was the Terminators. Turn 1, I would use the Sorcerer's Veilbreaker Plate to teleport up into the center of the table. Sometimes I would go for that charge by using the Master of Possessions to kill a guy, resurrect him closer, and go for that really quick, easy charge. Other times, I would just turtle on the center. I'd find a ruin that's adjacent to the center, put all the Terminators or as many as I could in cover whilst holding that central objective and protecting all my characters, and I would basically sit there and dare my opponent to come and take it from me. And because all of my other units, the Decimators, the Raptors, the Hellbrutes, they were all in strategic reserves. That meant that my opponent had no option but to engage with the Terminators. They couldn't do any damage to anything else because it wasn't on the table, which meant they had no choice but to waste bullets and waste combat units trying to kill those Terminators. So this was a really, really strong combo. Then Abaddon would be in the middle. He'd be giving those Terminators reroll hits and wounds, which is really, really powerful on the number of shots that they get, particularly when they're making combats as well, and they're getting it in the shooting phase and in the fight phase. Really strong. You could also combo this with the stratagem for +1 AP, like increase your AP by 1, and +6-inch range on the bolters. This meant that the Terminators were able to pretty reliably shoot down with bolters armigers, units of plasma inceptors, units of bikers in the Black Knights. They were able to shoot down things like custodian guard squads. They were shooting down tough targets just because they had so many shots, rerolling hits, rerolling wounds with AP1, really effective into this meta. Not so much in the previous Nephilim meta, but now that Armor of Contempt is gone, those bolters actually do serious work into all kinds of armies that they previously struggled to do damage into. Then, rerolling hits and wounds is also really, really powerful on those melter guns in the Terminator unit. So you're very likely to get the hit, you're very likely to get the wound, and then with 4 shots, probably getting 5 hits if you have the Wanton Massacre active, you are doing massive amounts of damage in that first turn. And then going in and charging things nearby. We'll talk about this in more detail in some of the games because there were a few games where I pulled off a turn 1 charge and then my opponent practically conceded because of the amount of damage that this Terminator unit can actually do. So there's a few more synergies in play here. There's the Illusory Supplication on the Dark Apostle. Now, everybody knows this one, it makes the unit really, really tough to kill, but he also has Blissful Devotion, which essentially allows a unit to advance and charge, as long as they're a Slanesh core unit. So this is also really, really good on the Terminators. Sometimes what I would do is I would teleport into the center of the table, I would put Illusory Supplication on the unit before they do, and then I would move and advance my Dark Apostle so that it's still within that 6-inch range. Then next turn, instead of going for the Illusory, I would put Blissful Devotion on it and then advance and charge out from the center. And then I would use the Black Legion strat to make the Abaddon of the Spoiler into a red Corsairs for a turn, so he could advance and charge out as well. And basically those two units would go from the center and they'd spring out into corners and do massive amounts of damage. And now my opponent had a problem because they had a Terminator unit that they could potentially kill now because it doesn't have Illusory Supplication, but it decimated that side of their field. And then you've got Abaddon over here on his own, isolated, so they could potentially go for the kill there, but again, he's gone in and done massive amounts of damage, and your opponent doesn't have the ability to kill all of that, generally speaking. So this was a really powerful way of putting my opponent in situations where they had difficult choices to make. You can, however, in some games, just keep putting that Illusory Supplication on them and just sit in the middle and just blast bolters downrange and dare your opponent to try to stop you. That can work in some games as well, and we will break down in detail in the later installments on how we went about doing that. Now let's talk about the Cultists. Now, Cultists, I think, are one of the most underrated units in the book. A lot of people were talking about how Arcs of Omen, oh, you don't need troops anymore, so people are not going to be bringing Cultists anymore. But I would bring them anyway, and did bring them anyway, for a number of key reasons. One of them is that things like Blood Angels are able to get turn 1 charges off quite reliably. And the challenge there is if you have the Terminators on the table, and your opponent can charge them in their first turn before you get your defensive powers up and before you're able to cast your prayers, they will be able to kill that Terminator unit very easily. So you need to protect it from those turn 1 charges, and Cultists are an amazing way to do this. Because basically what you do is you deploy the Terminators behind a ruin somewhere. You can deploy them all the way at the back of the table because it doesn't matter, you're likely to teleport in anyway. And then you basically wrap them with Cultists. So the Cultists are also out of line of sight, so your opponent can't shoot the Cultists, and then they can't charge the Terminators because they would need to get past the Cultist in order to do so. So you're effectively creating a meat shield with your Cultists that protect your Terminators from those dangerous melee threats. You can also use them to move block, which is really, really powerful. Against things like the Dark Angels where their Black Talons get, essentially like a 34, 37-inch move turn 1 and then can shoot, you need to be able to make sure that you put Cultists in the way so that they can't get past your Cultists in the movement phase. It means they're going to shoot those Cultists dead, but they're not shooting at your Terminators. Whereas if you didn't have the cultists in your list, you could be at a ruin all the way at the back of the table and it wouldn't matter. Those Dark Angels are going to fly around the corner and they're going to put a whole bunch of Plasma Talons into your Terminators and it's going to ruin your day. So the cultists were absolutely critical. They also have access to one of my new favorite stratagems, which is Tide of Traitors. I'll talk to you about the specifics on why that is so powerful in, I think it's installment 4, where we talk about the Imperial Guard matchup, because there was a few situations in there where I used Tide of Traitors to get massive swings in the victory points. Next, we have my new favorite unit, and that is the Humble Heckbrute, or Hellbrute as some people call it. And this unit got a huge glow up in Arcs of Omen. It's completely underrated. So first of all, they got free war gear, or more or less free war gear, which makes them a lot cheaper than they were previously. But mainly, they can now outflank or go into strategic reserves for free. And that gives them a whole new lease of life. And basically what I was doing is every single game I was putting all 3 Heckbrutes into strategic reserves, and then in turn 2 or 3, they would come on from a table edge, usually in a group of 3, but sometimes I would split them up. And they come on and they basically go, cool, here's 6 multi-melter shots, here's 6 plus 3d6 heavy flamer shots, and then they're charging. You got 3 opportunities at a 9-inch charge, so you're probably going to make 1 or 2 of them, and then they're punching the fuck out of things. So Heckbrutes were amazing for 105 points. Really, really solid. Then we round the list out with the Decimators. They were basically in there for the Demons matchup, which I never actually got to face Demons, but they were my insurance policy against those demons like the Big Bird Chicken, the Lord of Change that has a 3-up invulnerable save, toughness 8, and -1 to be wounded. That is a really tough cookie to crack. Most things will be wounding you on 6s, and then you're getting a 3-up invulnerable save. That's not going to die easily. However, Decimators, just mortal wound on 2s. So, no demon save, your negative toughness doesn't matter, your negative wound doesn't matter, your negative, your plus toughness doesn't matter. He's really effective at killing those things. They're really effective at killing the big unkillable Bloodthirster because they really easily just put 8 mortal wounds on him without really breaking a sweat. And they're also really good into what I was predicting, which was Thunderhammer Storm Shield Terminators. They can make them really tough. Dark Angels can make them transhuman. Dark Angels can make them, neg1 damage. Other Chaos Space Marine players, if they're bringing in the Terminator bricks, whoever has more Decimators generally wins that matchup because you're able to get through those Terminators with relative ease. So I had 2 of those Decimators in there. They were really, really strong. And then last but not least was the 5 Raptors. Their goal was basically for raising early banners, getting out there and doing actions, or by being in strat reserves and going for behind enemy lines, bullying those units that your opponent generally leaves on the backfield. So killing their cultists, killing their scouts, killing their, infantry like their guardsmen or whatever. The Raptors were really effective at going in and digging out those threats, digging out that backfield, and scoring behind enemy lines in the process. So that rounds out the list. There's a couple of other things that I want to mention on the Hellbrutes, because a lot of people raise an eyebrow at this, thinking, why Hellbrutes? They're such a weird unit that nobody's ever really taken in a competitive sense. But there's a few things that they do that's just insane. So obviously there's the strat reserves outflanking. Obviously melter guns are good, multi-melters are good, the power fist is good, heavy flamers are good. But there's one thing that they do that a lot of people have forgotten about, and that is that if they get shot in the opponent's shooting phase and they don't die, they can, for 1 command point, immediately making a shooting attack at the unit that shot them or at the closest enemy unit. Now, being Black Legion, they're going to be getting +1 to hit on that because they're shooting at the closest target. And then they're hitting with multi-melters, heavy flamers, really, really strong. So there was a few instances where somebody would move a character up and then near the Hellbrutes because they're going to go charge one and blow it up. And then they would shoot at one of them on the way down. And when they shoot it, I'm like, yep, cool, you didn't kill me, so I'm going to shoot back. And instead of shooting that thing down range that's probably out of range or out of line of sight anyway, I'm going to just shoot this character that's right in front of me because it's right there, it's the closest target. And that was amazing, and that caught so many people off guard. And further to that, they also get reroll 1s to hit after they've taken damage. So if your opponent shoots you and takes some damage, they don't bracket, they don't go down in effectiveness, they actually go up in effectiveness and get an out-of-sequence shooting attack that can really flip games on their head. We'll talk about that particularly in the next installment, the Imperial Knights matchup, because this was one thing that absolutely flipped that game in my favor. So I really look forward to sharing that with you. So make sure you check out the next part in this series if you want to learn a little bit more about how crazily powerful Hellbrutes are. I'm predicting most Chaos Space Marine lists going forward should be taking at least 1, but probably 3 Hellbrutes. They are so good in Arcs of Omen. They're so good with that free outflank. They're so good with the various stratagems they have access to. And they're just a very cheap, hyper-effective, points-efficient unit. So I'm a huge advocate for the Hellbrutes. I'm calling them Heckbrutes. Let's rebrand them. Let's rename them the Heckbrute. And yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. Let me know what you think of my list. Let me know what you think of the event. It was the first Arcs of Omen event, 250 players, biggest event Australia has ever had. So I'm really, really excited, and I want to share these results with you. So we're going to get straight into the next installment. Thanks as always for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to check out my Patreon. Check out all of the apparel that I sell. You can get a shirt like this one here. You can get neoprene objective markers. We've got dice for sale up on our Patreon, and we also have a unique Discord server where you can join. It's an amazing time over there. We've got a bunch of great guys, and we're also giving away a free 3D printed Angron this month. It'll be in your hands before the World Eaters Codex even hits the shelves. That will give you time to build and paint this model so that before you hit the tabletop, before you even get your hands on that World Eaters Codex, you're good to go. So with that being said, we're going to finish up here, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Welcome to the Black God.